Gears of War returns to the Xbox with a time jump and a new threat. Does the franchise's first outing on the next generation deserve your attention, or will it get swallowed whole by the end of year AAA crush? Gears of War 4 takes place 25 years after the events of Gears 3 and the final human victory over the Locust threat. The cost of victory was high, however, and 2.5 decades later, martial law remains in place while the planet Sarah is constantly ravaged by vicious storms known as wildflares. This time around, players take the role of new protagonist, JD Phoenix, son of Marcus. From the very beginning of the game, the change of protagonist adds a new feel to Gears of War. JD's demeanour is nothing like the gruff, no-nonsense of his father, being a wisecracking lead, verging on happy-go-lucky. He's far more in common with Nathan Drake than Marcus Phoenix.
Well, the good news is they're dead. The bad news, I kinda wrecked the loader.
Let's just move on, shall we?
JD and the other supporting characters, Del and Kate, signal a new generation for the franchise, a passing of the torch. The old crew is still welcome, and it's a joy to hear Marcus's voice, but they're no longer the stars of the show. The opening firefights further suggest Gears of War is moving in a new, fresh direction, as you battle robotic peacekeepers known as DBs, rather than the Locust of old. It's a bright setting with sharp, clear lines, and not what I expected from a Gears game. Unfortunately, this hint of a new direction doesn't last long. While a new enemy soon emerges, they look, sound and fight a lot like the Locust of old, who were supposedly wiped out in Gears of War 3. From their emergence, the game feels more and more like the original, a familiar enemy in a familiar environment with a familiar story. Depending on your point of view, this may be a good thing, but it feels like a missed opportunity to me. With the old foe defeated and a time jump, we could have seen JD and crew battling an oppressive government, an invading alien race, or even fighting off-world in the search for resources. But once again, we're tasked with fighting creatures that come from below.
Okay, Dad. You've obviously done this before.
No, but close enough. Come on.
Enemies even appear from nests that look and act identical to the emergence holes of the original trilogy.
Those guys.
Did they just crawl out of an emergence hole?
The campaign story, while certainly not bad, isn't anything particularly exciting or new. It clicks in at around 10 hours, a length that feels about right, although the shallow narrative may make it feel a little long. Much like the enemies, it feels too familiar to provide any genuine excitement. The story and enemies are not the only familiar aspects of Gears 4, but in the case of the gameplay, it's a far more welcome return. There is little doubt that the Gears of War games are some of the best cover-based shooters money can buy, and it remains so with Gears 4. Few games capture the feel of a firefight like running through, into and over cover like Gears of War, and the game is at its best during protracted firefights, exchanging gunfire and darting from cover to cover.
Get over here! Scratch one drone!
You are forced out of cover a little bit more this time around, particularly in the early stages against the DB robots, which is frustrating. While a variety of enemies is certainly nice, the game is not nearly as enjoyable when your combat takes place out in the open. Gears 4 sees the introduction of some new weapons, like the Buzzkill that shoots saw blades that bounce around the environment, or the Overkill, which is a shotgun that fires on the trigger being pulled and released. These are fun diversions, but you'll find the Lancer hard to put aside. Besides being the best weapon for medium to long range gunfights, it still has the chainsaw for murder. There's some really nice variation in the outside locations, and at times the game is mighty pretty, particularly the wind flares. Gears 4 also does a great job of breaking up the action with more cinematic sections from time to time. I usually find breaks in the core gameplay to be really frustrating in any game, but these sequences are both well executed and they do not overstay their welcome. One of the highlights of the Gears series has always been the ability to play the entire campaign in co-op, and that returns. You can now play locally on split screen, online and cross-platform on both Xbox and PC. It's also worth noting that if you grab the game digitally, it's a play anywhere, meaning that you can play it across platforms including saves and multiplayer stats. Speaking of multiplayer, the return of Horde mode is a highlight in Gears 4. It's hectic, tense and a lot of fun, particularly in a group that's on voice comms and works together. The premise is simple: survive increasingly difficult waves of enemies with the aid of buildable defences constructed with power acquired from your defeated foes. You'll get random boss type enemies every 10 waves, and there are 50 waves in total to survive. With the leveling progression and various classes, it is surprisingly deep and could keep you playing for months just by itself. There is also a versus mode, which is a lot of fun, although it can at times be overly long. All up, it's a great online package to support the campaign. I do have to point out the microtransactions though. While the microtransactions are not horribly priced, I find it more and more disappointing that we are now expected to pay full price for a game, a season pass which is often half the price again of the game if not more, and then the game has microtransactions as well. It hasn't had an effect on the score, but it bothers me nonetheless.
Not a goddamn word.
There's a dropship!
Shit, they're gonna mess up my fucking tomatoes!
Gears of War 4 does what the Gears of War franchise has done best for the life of the franchise: deliver the best cover-based shooting in gaming. The gameplay is tight and there is little more you could ask of it, and the online features are fantastic. Not just that, any game that supports a local multiplayer gets a huge kick from us. That being said, it feels like a missed opportunity. It sprinkles some new ideas throughout the game, but this could be Gears of War 1 with a happier protagonist and you'd barely know the difference. Regardless, it's a great game and worthy of your investment. All the more so if you'll engage in the exceptional Horde mode.
First my tomatoes, now this!
Dad, this wind flare's not letting up. We gotta move.
Gears of War 4, 8.5 out of 10.